The following program contains coarse language. Listener discretion is advised.
Our fight for social, economic, racial, and environmental justice.
I think the American people are going to have to say to NBC and ABC and CBS and CNN, you know what? Forget the political gossip. Talk about the real damn issues facing this country.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation, your host Jeff Waldorf. Got a great show for you guys today. Friday show, first time we've done that in probably forever. So we're doing, 5 days a week. We're doing what we can. A little bit more casual, Cash Friday. So got my Wrecking Ball shirt on, and not the usual dress shirt, but nonetheless, maybe casual Friday, but unfortunately, we do have some very serious topics to go through as well. I have a little bit of a breakdown to go through on the show. First off, we've got FBI story, very, very important, very involved. It's probably going to take up a lot of the show, but super, super important to get to. And then, of course, you remember Martin Shkreli, you remember CEO of Mylan Heather Bresch, and how their companies basically jacked up the price of a life-saving drug. Well, we've got another story about a similar, another company doing the same thing. Disaster. Then we have the Bowling Green massacre. What is it? And why is Twitter going crazy? That's fun. Voter fraud. We've got that as well. And then finally, we're going to have a little fun in the last segment here and talk about Jim Bakker. It's been a long time since I did like a Jim Bakker, Pat Robertson type story. So we're going to have some fun. Jim Bakker's going to bounce some demons, and it's going to be great. Also, I do want to open up and let everybody know that you can call into the show. I will be taking some questions throughout the show. I might have to keep you on hold for a little bit while we get through a story, but I will take a couple of calls here, your guys' questions and comments throughout the show. That's if you want to get a hold of me through Skype, TYT Nation on Skype, or 989-796-4975 is the number. So if you do want to call in and like ask a little bit of a question or give me like a comment and a story that we've done, great, fantastic, love to do that. So we'll do some of that today as part of a little casual Friday. So anyway, with that, I do of course want to give shout out to the patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. Thank you guys and gals for supporting the show. Couldn't do it without you. Love you guys. You make the show happen. And thank you. And, anybody else wants to become a patron, support truly independent progressive media, do so. Patreon.com/TYT Nation. All right. Again, a lot of story ahead of you. So let's get the big one out of the way. And then we'll go and have some a little bit of fun. So, first, the FBI. All right, The Intercept out with a chilling report recently. Apparently, different law enforcement agencies around the country have been infiltrated by racist white supremacist groups. Now, again, I've had some experience with white supremacists. I'm on a couple of lists now. They're kind of pissed off at me. But nonetheless, I think it's important to do these stories because that's what we don't want in our government. Now, this information, of course, comes from a classified FBI counterterrorism policy guide from April of 2015. Now, this guide was obtained by The Intercept. So now, look, again, this is a big story. There's a lot to break down here. How they've, what methods they use to get into these police departments all over the country. So there's a lot of stuff. And Alice Speary, who writes this article, actually does an excellent job breaking this down in its entirety. Now, obviously, I don't have enough time to do that. It would probably take most of the show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an overview. I'm going to add some commentary. And look, if you want to check out the whole report, which I heavily suggest that you do, I've got a link to that report here in the description. Now, in this guide, the FBI details the process in which it enters individuals on a terrorism watch list called the Known or Suspected Terrorist File. Now, not only does the FBI look at known or suspected jihadists, people who are, members of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, whatever, right? Okay, they also look into domestic terrorism as well, because that's also an issue. Now, domestic terrorism, of course, focuses on militia extremists, white supremacist extremists, and sovereign citizen extremists. For example, the sovereign citizens actually attacked and killed 2 police officers in Las Vegas. Now, these people were previously seen at the Bundy Ranch. Now, whether or not they were kicked off the Bundy Ranch, I'm not entirely sure, or they left of their own volition to do this heinous attack on 2 police officers in Las Vegas, I don't really know. But nonetheless, that's an example of sovereign citizen extremists and one of their terrorist attacks on our police forces. Now, in this report, it is noted, and this what's really, really scary, is that the FBI often have identified active links between these groups and law enforcement officers. Now, the report also explains in some detail how Bureau policies have been crafted to take this infiltration into account, so they know. Okay, so again, basically what it's saying, white supremacist, anti-government groups are infiltrating police. Now, how are they able to do so? Well, The Intercept explains that since there is no centralized recruitment process or set of national standards for the 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, many of which they explain have deep historical connections to racist ideologies. As a result, state and local police, as well as sheriff departments, present ample opportunities for white supremacists and other right-wing extremists looking to expand their power base. So, and look, what better way to get power, training, and access to weapons than being part of the police? And it is kind of ironic if you're one of those anti-government types getting into government. Well, hey, I guess it makes sense. They got all the guns. You go to the place where they have all the guns and all the training. Okay, well, makes sense. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, well, look, what's the issue? It shouldn't matter what kind of ideology they have, right? As long as they do their jobs, as long as they do it fairly. But again, there is no indication that they are actually doing their job fairly. In fact, there's evidence of the contrary. In a heavily redacted version of an October 2006 FBI internal intelligence assessment, the agency raised the alarm over white supremacist groups' historical interest in infiltrating law enforcement communities or recruiting law enforcement personnel. The effort, the memo noted, can lead to investigative breaches and can jeopardize the safety of law enforcement sources or personnel. And, of course, also you can jeopardize the people that the police are supposed to protect, the citizens, especially people of color. Okay, so look, not only is it putting the police in jeopardy or police sources, it puts the people, the citizens at risk when you have people with these hateful ideologies. And now, speaking of people of color, do you think that somebody who hates black people so much is going to treat them fairly if there's some sort of confrontation? I'm not exactly sure that they would. Okay. So now you might think, be thinking, okay, how do they identify these people? You might also think that basically white supremacists are people that are easily identifiable, right? That they can identify these people because of their tattoos or, their skinheads or they're covered in swastikas or white power symbols or whatever. They should be easy to spot. Well, actually, no. And I know this may not be a great example, but you have the Charleston shooter, right? Now, he was somebody who had a deep racism. I mean, this guy believed that he had to kill 9 innocent people because the blacks are taking our women. They're taking our women. And so, those are white supremacist views. Now, I don't think he was part of any white supremacist group, as far as I know, but I could be wrong on that. But even if he was not, he was influenced by those groups and had a deep-seated hatred for minorities. And look, if you look at this guy, and my overall point is, he looks like he's 150 pounds soaking wet. No tattoos that I could see. And only, no indication that he would look like somebody that we would normally associate with as someone who is a white supremacist or from a white supremacist group. In fact, the guy, he just had a ridiculous bowl cut that I can guarantee half the kids from the 90s had. Even me, I had one. Don't judge me. It turns out there was a time where I actually had hair. I know. But seriously, though, the point is that white supremacists don't have a certain look. They can look like anyone, and it turns out that this is actually part of their plan. There's a term for this. Now, the memo states that law enforcement had just recently become aware of a term known as ghost skins, used among white supremacists to describe those who avoid overt displays of their beliefs to blend into society and covertly advance white supremacist causes. In at least one cause, the FBI learned of a skinhead group encouraging ghost skins to seek employment with law enforcement agencies in order to warn crews of any investigations. Now, again, this is some disturbing stuff. So they're like, yeah, we're gonna tell you not to get these tattoos or whatever. So you don't look like a white nationalist. You don't look like a white supremacist. Okay? And then you can infiltrate much, much easier. Now, what are the effects of this infiltration? Now, in LA, for example, they write, the U.S. District Court judge found in 1991 that members of a local sheriff's department had formed a neo-Nazi gang and had habitually terrorized Black and Latino residents. Well, you give somebody power, and somebody especially with that racist ideology, who do you think they're going to use it against? Blacks and Latinos. Now, in Chicago, for example, John Burge, who was a police detective and rumored Ku Klux Klan member, was fired and eventually prosecuted in 2008. Now, he was arrested over charges relating to the torture of at least 120 black men during his decade-long career. Let's see. Burge notoriously referred to an electric shock device he used during an interrogation known as, and I'm sorry about the language, nigger box. That's what they called it. No, not a racist at all. What are you talking about? In Cleveland, officials found that a number of police officers had scrawled racist or Nazi graffiti throughout the department's locker rooms. In Texas, 2 police officers were fired when it was discovered that they were part of the Klan. One of them said he had tried to boost the organization's membership by giving an application to a fellow officer he thought was, quote, he thought shared his white Christian heterosexual values. So those are just some of the examples and some of the ramifications of the white supremacist infiltration into our law enforcement. They aren't treating minorities equally when they're on the job. Of course, they're not protecting and serving. What they're using is they're using law enforcement as a means to sometimes punish and torture black people simply because of how much they hate them, their racist ideology. And they're also using it as a recruiting tool. So what you have is this right-wing white supremacy destroying the image of police in America and hurting the very citizens they're supposed to protect. Now, look, I gotta note, obviously, not all police are white supremacists. That's insane. And nobody's even saying that, right? But look, there is a presence. They are there. They have infiltrated. And we know about it. The government knows about it. And look, it's disturbing. And of course, instead of just focusing on radical Islam, we should be concerned about the hate that we have here. And unfortunately, we have not done that. In fact, when the Obama administration tried, they ended up getting intense blowback from conservatives and Republicans who were worried about, oh my God, you're targeting our racist base. The Intercept writes that in 2009, shortly after the election of Barack Obama, a Department of Homeland Security intelligence study, written in coordination with the FBI, warned of the resurgence of right-wing extremism. Quote, right-wing extremists have capitalized on the election of the first African-American president and are focusing their efforts to recruit new members, mobilize existing supporters, and broaden their scope and appeal through propaganda, the report noted, singling out disgruntled military veterans as likely targets for recruitment. Right-wing extremists will attempt to recruit and radicalize returning veterans in order to exploit their skills and knowledge derived from military training and combat. The report concluded that lone wolves and small terrorist cells embracing violent right-wing extremist ideology are the most dangerous domestic terrorism threat in the United States. Not Muslims, not left-wingers, right-wing domestic terrorism. That was the number one threat. But of course, you had these right-wingers that cry and cry and cry. I mean, look, the right-wing outrage is what stopped this report in 2009 from being widely circulated around the news. Quote, this report caused uproar among conservatives who were particularly angered by the suggestion that veterans might be implicated, and by the broad brush of which the report seemed to paint a large range of right-wing groups. Now, the Intercept continues, faced with mounting criticism, DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano disavowed the document and apologized to veterans, which, again, it's not that they were out there saying that, no, the veterans are all right-wing, terrorists. No, nobody was saying that. But the way that the right wing had portrayed this and used politics and politicized this issue, which is an issue that I think affects all of us. The fact that there is right-wing domestic terror groups in America right now, and they have been growing ever since the election of Barack Obama, it should be concerning to everyone because it puts everyone at risk, especially African Americans and Latinos and other minorities. But instead, Obama, Janet Napolitano, the Obama administration said, oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry, right-wingers. We're so sorry. We didn't mean to. You know what we're going to do? We're going to shut down the department that actually looks at this. We're going to fire a whole bunch of people that were looking into this issue and only look at jihadis. Only look at Islamic extremism. That's what we're going to do. That's insane because while jihadist extremism, Islamic extremism is a definite threat, they're ignoring our homegrown threats. It's insanity. I mean, seriously, this was a political issue, okay? An absolutely political issue. And there are some serious threats from right-wing extremism. For example, again, this is through the Obama years, right? You had the attack on the Sikh temple, the Charleston shooting, the murder of a New York imam. And look, it's not just against Muslims, Sikhs or the blacks. You also had the Jewish community. There was a Jewish community that was also attacked by a shooter. And of course, all this is influenced by right-wing supremacist views. But instead, of course, we focus only on the Muslims. It's always the Muslims, right? Now, especially after that report where the Obama administration, in the face of Republicans crying and whining about how Obama painted the Tea Party protests, which, by the way, the Tea Party protests were quite small. Decent size, I guess, for a protest, and largely nonviolent. So, no, we weren't painting the Tea Party protests as some violent uprising. They were ridiculous people walking around in revolutionary hats. And protest, I don't agree with the protest. Or I should say, I don't agree with what they were protesting about as far as we need to take our country back with right-wing values. Now, of course, when they were originally going after the banks and the bank bailouts, I actually did agree with that. But anyway, in the Tea Party protests, we're not saying that those guys were the extremists. So nowhere in that report did it actually say that. But anyway, right-wing politicians, they took a look at that and said, we're going to play politics with this issue. And we're going to basically say that none of our base, some of our base that can get actually violent, the very small sliver of conservatives that are very, very anti-government, anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, anti-black and Latino, anti-minority, all that, not an issue, doesn't exist. Let's look at the Muslims because they are the primary threat. Even though there are numbers out there that prove that is absolutely false. That is wrong. Now, look, Again, this is a continued and growing problem with right-wing extremism. And now you have Daryl Johnson here, a quote, who was the lead researcher in that DHS report that they disavowed. Johnson now runs DT Analytics, which is a consulting firm that analyzes domestic extremism. Now, he says federal law enforcement agencies in general, the FBI, the Marshals, the ATF, are aware that extremists have infiltrated state and local law enforcement agencies, and that there are people there in law enforcement agencies that may be sympathetic to these groups. He says that since he left, the problem has gotten, quote, a lot more troublesome. And now he points out some specific groups, Oath Keepers, Constitutional Sheriffs, and Peace Officers Association for their anti-government attitudes and efforts to recruit active as well as retired law enforcement officers. Johnson says, quote, that's the biggest issue, and it's greater now than it's ever been, in my opinion. Adding that Homeland Security has given up tracking right-wing domestic events. It's only the FBI now, he said, adding that local police departments don't seem to be doing anything to address the problem. There's not even any training now to make state and local police aware of these groups and how they could infiltrate their ranks. And look, it's not even just police. There were some white supremacists that went through military training as well. Now, for this, I go to Pete Simi, who's a sociologist at Chapman University. Now, he spent decades studying the proliferation of white supremacists in the U.S. military. And talking to The Intercept, he talked about how difficult it was for us to even have a conversation about this on a federal level. He said, quote, the report underscores the problem of even discussing this issue. It underscores how difficult this issue is to get any traction on because there are a lot of people that just don't want to discuss this, let alone actually do something about it. Because right now, I mean, look, you say Black Lives Matter at this point, and there's a group of people that come out and say, Blue Lives Matter too. Blue Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. Well, we're not saying that police don't matter. There's not an actual war on police. That is a narrative coming out of the right wing. And so, but that's just a couple of barriers that we have, is that we can't have a conversation, because as soon as you bring up things like police brutality even towards the black community, immediately you're painted as somebody who is anti-law and order and anti-police. And that's not at all what it actually is. We want to fix the police. We want to make the police better. We actually want to make them serve the community. But you can't do that if you can't fix anything. You can't do police reform unless you can actually discuss the problem. It's the same thing with right-wingers always coming out and saying, you got to say radical Islam. You got to say radical Islam. You actually have to say what it is before you can actually solve the problem. You can't solve the problem unless you name it. Well, we're naming the problem. We're naming the problem. And immediately, of course, they're going to cry and they're going to whine. No, it's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Radical Islam. Insanity. Now, Simi said that the extremist strategy to infiltrate the military and law enforcement had existed for decades. In a study he conducted of individuals indicted for far-right terrorism-related activities, he found that at least 31% had military experience. Now, look, that's a significant number. And I think it should concern a lot of people. Now, we're not saying that 31% of the military are white supremacists. That's not what the numbers are actually saying. But 31% of people who had done these right-wing terrorist activities just happened to have been trained by the military. And so, yes, it is a significant number of people who had done these attacks, but nowhere near significant when it comes to people that have actually been in the military. So let's be completely honest about this. Now, there is some good news on this. After a series of investigations uncovered substantial members of extremists in the military, the Department of Defense moved to impose stricter screenings, including monitoring recruits' tattoos for white supremacist symbols and discharging those found to espouse racist views. Now, that's great from the military. Awesome. Now, why doesn't the police do that? Well, I've got an answer for you. The Intercept notes that it's because of the decentralized way in which the thousands of police departments across the country happen to operate. The historical affinity of certain police departments with the same racial ideologies espoused by extremists, and an even broader reluctance to do anything about it. Simi said, quote, "If you look at the history of law enforcement in the United States, it is a history of white supremacy. To put it bluntly," said Simi, citing the origin of U.S. policing in the slave patrols of the 18th and 19th century. More recently, just going back 50 years, law enforcement, particularly in the South, was filled with Klan members. Disaster. Not only that, but a lot of police departments don't screen officers for hate group affiliation. The Southern Poverty Law Center has reported that the number of these groups had peaked at more than 1,000 in 2011 from less than half of that in the late 1990s. Though experts like Simi note that many of these groups come and go and that membership between them is often fluid. So yes, this does seem to be quite a massive problem. And yes, there are officers that have been fired for spouting racist views. But oftentimes, unfortunately, without these screening protocols, they end up getting hired somewhere else. So look, this whole thing is incredibly frustrating and incredibly disturbing, and it's something that we need to look into a lot more. But not just look into it, we need to do something about it. These are the types of people who just do not belong in law enforcement. And look, you wonder why black people tend to be more distrustful and combative with police. This is kind of why. Because they've experienced certain racist police officers. Again, not saying all police officers are racist, or even a majority of them. I'm saying that there are racist police officers, and they tend to make everyone look bad. We don't know the number of police officers that are members of white supremacist groups, and maybe I suspect that we'll never know truly how many of them are infiltrating our police officers. And look, we need to actually look at this, because we won't find out. We won't even get anywhere close to finding out and stopping them until we look, or at least until we try to screen people. And only then can we actually begin to reform the police so that they can serve and protect everyone equally like they're supposed to. Okay. I told you that was going to be long. There's a lot of stuff that we needed to cover in that story, so thank you for sticking with me on that. Let's go to something a little different. Unless, of course, there are any calls. 796-4975 is how you can get in touch with the show. If you have a comment or a question on any of the stories that we're doing, I'd love to hear from you. All right. With that, let's move on to the next story. Not long after Martin Shkreli, former CEO of Turing Pharmaceuticals, and Heather Bresch, the current CEO of Mylan Pharmaceuticals, instituted giant price hikes for drugs that really, in reality, cost very little to make. There's another company that is again hiking the price of a potentially life-saving drug in order to make an outsized profit. Now, this is from a small Virginia company called Kalia. Now, they make a injector device called Evzio. Now, look, Evzio is a drug that has something called naloxone in it. It's actually more of an injector device for naloxone. Now, they have seen their demand for this auto-injector in the drug thanks to the unfortunate use of opioids. We have an opioid epidemic. So again, this demand for this drug and this injector in general, made by Evzio, or made by Kaleo, is fueled by what's going on is a national emergency when it comes to drugs. Now, again, the injector is used to deliver naloxone, which is a life-saving antidote to overdoses of opioids. Now, according to data from 2015, more than 33,000 people are believed to have died from such overdoses of opioids. So now this injector, what it can do is it can literally save somebody's life because it counteracts an overdose. So look, that makes sense, right? And now, unfortunately, because of the demand for this product, the privately held firm has now raised the price of one twin pack from $690 in 2014 to $4,500 for a pack of two now. So what in the hell, man? That is insane. That is an enormous jump. Now, the company, Coolio, was founded by twin brothers Eric and Evan Edwards. Now, the company first sought to develop an EpiPen competitor, thanks to their own food allergies. So they're like, hey, we would like to go into business. We would actually like to go and create a competitor for the EpiPen. And so, we can bring this life-saving drug to somebody else. I guess somewhere along the way, they were bitten by greed. So they've taken that model, and they've taken that auto-injector to try to combat the opioid epidemic for some profit. Now, there is some difference between the auto-injector and, let's say, the EpiPen. Now, the thing that's special about EBCO is that it ends up talking the users through the process as they inject the naloxone. Now, the company says the talking device is worth this new price because, quote, it can guide anyone to jab an overdose victim correctly, leave the needle in for the right amount of time, and potentially save his or her life. So, look, that's obviously an amazing feature. That's great. It can save lives. However, the one argument that I have against that is if you price it like this, $4,500 for two of them, well, nobody can afford your product because, look, you've raised the price so much that no one can afford it and you can't save anybody's life. It's crazy. And look, I understand the laws of supply and demand, right? And yes, even the price of the naloxone itself has been climbing. So it does cost a little bit more to make. But again, that as well is attributed to corporate greed and demand. For example, a 10 millimeter vial sold by one of the dominant vendors cost close to about $150. Now, that is a price increase of double from that of a few years ago, and actually far beyond the production costs of naloxone, according to researchers who researched this topic. Now, the other common injectable, which comes in a smaller, more potent dose, costs closer to $40, which is actually double its 2009 cost. So you've seen, thanks to this demand, this opioid epidemic that's happening in the Midwest, the price of these drugs, thanks to capitalism, has gone up. Still, there are experts that look at all this and say, yeah, we see the price of the drug has gone up, but there's still no reason that you should be charging so much for this. In fact, this is a needless drain on our healthcare system. Leo Beletsky, an associate professor of law and health sciences at the Northeastern University in Boston, said, quote, there's absolutely nothing that warrants them charging what they're charging. The device has been invaluable to patients, says Eliza Wheeler of San Francisco's Harm Reduction Coalition, which is a nonprofit that works to combat overdoses and has received even donations of this drug. But she says, at $4,500 a package? I might have $10,000 to spend on naloxone for a year to supply a whole city. If I have $10,000 to spend, I certainly can't even buy 2 EBCOs. Insane. Now, of course, the company is defending their price hikes by saying, hey, man, look how innovative our design is. We're the only ones that have it. We came up with it, and so we deserve to make a little bit of a profit. And as well as help people. Well, again, if somebody can't afford your product, or if most people can't, you're not going to help anybody. Now, this is a quote from Mark Herzog, who was Coolio's vice president of corporate affairs. Now, in an email, he said that most earlier naloxone devices were developed, designed, and intended for use in medically supervised settings. Prior kits, for example, contained a pre-filled syringe. The EBCO, he says, was the first to help lay people dispense the drug, and competition is limited. One of the few consumer-friendly alternatives to EBCO is a nasal spray device for naloxone. So, look, in that, Herzog hits on something super important. You have a lack of competition. Well, since we're the only ones making it, we can end up gouging people, but hey, look at how innovative our device is, so we can charge what we want. So we think that it's worth jacking up the price. And look, I get it. Our system allows that, but not only allows it, it incentivizes that. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how much profit you can squeeze out of something to please not only your bottom line, but the shareholders as well. And yes, the injector is innovative and it is helpful. But at the same time, you can't price it out of reach just because there's a little bit more demand, especially when you can still manufacture it almost as cheaply as you did before, even with the price hike of the drug. We have this system that is built on profit. And the thing is, too, is that, I mean, you could be saying, well, why? Okay, well, you could just get the naloxone and whatever, and, have an injection on hand without using this special auto injector. I mean, you could still get that pretty cheaply, right? Well, again, same thing with the EpiPen. If you try to do it incorrectly, if you don't know what you're doing, you might end up killing that person instead of saving their lives. So that's the consideration. And look, the entire reason that the FCO device is so widely needed is because there is not always somebody around that knows what they're doing, that knows how to do this correctly, that knows where to inject it, when, for how long, and how much. So that's why it's important. This could save lives if it were more accessible. Right now, this is inaccessible. And the shame not only lies in the company. No, what the company is doing is that they're doing capitalism. They're saying, well, we're using the system the way that everybody else uses the system. We got to make a profit. Our shareholders got to benefit. So we're going to do what we're going to do. We're going to do what we have to do in order to continue to make that profit. And it's in such demand. So we're just going to follow the laws of supply and demand. And look, to be fair, they have given out plenty of these to schools, libraries, and stuff like that. But at the same time, not even that, doing all that should justify the cost, especially when it's still fairly cheap to make. The system is broken. And that's why I don't necessarily blame the company itself. I don't even blame Mylan as much. And I don't even blame, and I hate to say it, Turing Pharmaceuticals all that much. Yes, they share in blame. But I think the real problem here is the system. This is that same system that did allow Martin Shkreli to gouge people on Daraprim. Or the same system that allowed the Mylan CEO, Heather Bresch, to gouge people with the EpiPen. We've got to fix the system. And look, people see these stories and they get pissed and they get angry and they write letters and do all this stuff. But in the end, the system has not changed. Maybe Mylan hands out some coupons, which they did, or they Turing Pharmaceuticals, fires Martin Shkreli and then slightly takes back the price a little bit, and maybe they do some press tours and they talk about how charitable they are, and like this guy's doing, or their donations of drugs to schools and libraries, but it does not solve the problem of us having a healthcare system that is based not on health outcomes, but mainly on corporate profits. That is where the problem lies. And until we as a nation address that elephant in the room, we're going to continue to see stories like these pop up every once in a while, where unfortunately the majority of people, they get pissed off about it, and then they forget about it until we move on to the next one. I actually want to fix this system. I actually want to do something better so that we no longer incentivize profits over people, because that's not the way our healthcare system is supposed to work. Okay. Again, I told you it's going to be a bit of a heady day. A lot of important stuff. So we're going to move on. We got more stories. We got the Bowling Green Massacre. This is fun. That's our next story. All right. Now, Kellyanne Conway loves her alternative facts. And she continues to love to make them up on the spot to justify what President Trump is actually doing. Now, an example of that is where she was on recently talking with MSNBC's Chris Matthews. Now, what she was doing when she was having that conversation is she was defending Donald Trump's Muslim ban by using Barack Obama's so-called his own travel ban in response to what she called the Bowling Green Massacre. Now, let's take a look at this video This is great. This is amazing. As soon as I can find it.
In this case, he is calling for extreme vetting from 7 countries that President Obama first identified. Right. All he did was take his lead. He didn't even add to the list. Yeah. It's the 7 countries that were previously identified by President Obama as being high risk, as being states that either harbor, train, or export terrorism. These are nations very narrowly prescribed and also temporary.
Sure.
I bet there was very little coverage. I bet it's brand new information to people that President Obama had a 6-month ban on the Iraqi refugee program after 2 Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green massacre. Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered.
Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered. Bowling Green Massacre. Now, man, that sounds awful. Why didn't it get covered, Kellyanne? Oh, right. It's because it never happened. Oops. Now, what the hell is she talking about? What is the Bowling Green Massacre? Or what is this 2 Iraqis that did this horrible thing in Kentucky? Well, the Washington Post explains. Conway was likely referring to 2 Iraqi citizens living in Bowling Green. Now, these citizens were arrested in 2011 and eventually sentenced to federal prison for attempting to send weapons and money to al-Qaeda in Iraq for the purpose of killing U.S. soldiers. Now, this is according to a statement from the Justice Department. Now, the men were Mohammed Sharif Hamadi, and he was sentenced to life in federal prison, where there's Wa'ad Ramadan Alwan, who was sentenced to 31 to 40 years in federal prison, followed by a life term of supervised release. Both men pleaded guilty to federal terrorism charges. Well, holy shit. That's actually very, very serious, and a super serious sentence. Great. Justice was served. They found these guys who were trying to send weapons to to people who were attacking our soldiers. Great. Well, now what does this have to do with Bowling Green? Well, why is this called a Bowling Green massacre? Well, I'll get to that. Now, here's what the Justice Department said about this case in a January 29th, 2013 statement. Hamadi and Alwan both admitted in FBI interviews that followed waiver of their Miranda rights to participation in the purported material support operations in Kentucky, and both provided the FBI details of their prior involvement in insurgent activities while living in Iraq. Both men believed their activities in Kentucky were supported AQI. Alwan admits participating in IED attacks against U.S. soldiers in Iraq, and Hamadi admitted to participating to 10 to 11 IED attacks, as well as shooting at a U.S. soldier in an observation tower. So look, these guys were terrible people. These were bad guys, right? And I'm glad we found them. And I'm glad that they're in prison. Look, the system works, right? That system works. Now, of course, there are more details on how they were found living in Kentucky, since obviously they were not caught. And that, of course, is kind of the crux of Kellyanne's argument. Oh, if only we had caught them before they came in. Now, how did they find these 2 gentlemen? Now, court documents filed in this case revealed that the Bowling Green office of the FBI's Louisville division had initiated an investigation of Alwan, in which they used something called a confidential human source. The CHS met with Alwan and recorded their meetings and conversations beginning of August 2010. The CHS represented to Alwan that he was working with a group to ship money and weapons to Mujahideen in Iraq. From September 2010 to May of 2011, Alwan participated in 10 separate operations to send weapons and money that he believed were destined for terrorists in Iraq. Obviously, they weren't actually going to terrorists in Iraq. I'm kind of surprised that I might actually have to tell people. But since it was an operation charted by the FBI, they weren't actually sending those weapons out. So no terrorists got weapons. But anyway, again, between October 2010 and January 2011, Alwan drew diagrams of multiple types of IEDs and instructed the CHS how to make them. In January 2011, Alwan recruited Hamadi, a fellow Iraqi national living in Bowling Green, to assist in these material support operations. Now, beginning in January 2011 and continuing until his arrest in late May of 2011, Hamadi participated with Alwan in helping load money and weapons that he believed were destined for terrorists in Iraq. So, again, there's your context. That's how they found them. A great investigation into the FBI, or I'm sorry, from the FBI into these guys. They did their job. Great. Now, how does this relate to Kellyanne Conway? Well, it relates to her, to what happened after the arrests of these two men. Now, Conway reiterated claims from President Trump that his refugee policy is similar to what President Obama did in 2011, when he banned visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months. Conway said it was, and you heard it, brand new information to people that Obama enacted a 6-month ban on the Iraqi refugee program. Breitbart also reported earlier this week that Obama suspended the Iraqi refugee program for 6 months over terrorism fears in 2011. Now, of course, the problem is that that's actually not what happened, and both Breitbart, Trump, and Kellyanne Conway were coming up with alternative facts, things that were actually not true. The Obama administration told the Post that there was actually never a point when Iraqi resettlement was stopped or banned. In the aftermath of the arrest of the two Iraqis living in Kentucky, the Obama administration instead imposed more extensive background checks on Iraqi refugees, so-called extreme vetting. That's what it is. Now, of course, the new screening procedures did end up creating a dramatic slowdown in visa approvals. Since you have these new standards, looking at these people, it's actually going to take longer to vet them. And so it's going to seem like, oh, you banned all these people from coming in. There's nobody coming in. There's nobody coming in from Iraq. You banned them. You banned them. Actually, no, it's just so slow that maybe you could call it an effective ban because of how slow they were being processed, but it never was a ban. People continued to get approved, albeit at a much, much slower pace. In fact, it slowed visas to a crawl. Again, when you do more screening, it's going to take time. So yes, Obama was doing extreme vetting of refugees from Iraq for a period of 6 months, not banning them as Kellyanne Conway claims. So see, what this is that this is an example of playing politics, using alternative facts to justify their ban on certain members of a certain religion. It is a Muslim ban. Remember, Donald Trump said, it is a complete shutdown of Muslims coming from the Middle East, from these countries, until we can figure out what the hell is going on. Complete shutdown. It's a Muslim ban. He said it himself. Not only that, but he also said, we would bring in the Christians. The Christians, great. Let's shut down the Muslims coming from these countries, but the Christians are okay. Syrian Christians, come on over. That is a religious test on immigration. And then shutting down the refugee program indefinitely was another part of his executive order. Trying to compare this, as Kellyanne Conway has, to what Obama did is like comparing apples to chihuahuas. They are not the same. One was actually a way of increasing national security after an event which prompted them to go, oh, maybe we should take a look at this. Maybe we should look at these people and screen them and vet them a little bit better. The other one is just to ban people that they don't like. That's the truth of the matter. These are facts, not alternative facts. And now you know. All right. Anyway, more Trump stuff. You all remember that massive that giant investigation into massive voter fraud? You know, that was purported to happen in the 2016 election, where Donald Trump essentially claimed that 3 million at least illegal immigrants voted for Hillary Clinton. Well, if you're waiting for that investigation to happen, you might actually be waiting for a long time, because it might not ever happen. Now, earlier, of course, Donald Trump had pledged to sign an executive order to begin that massive investigation. However, the signing of that executive order was actually supposed to happen yesterday. It had been canceled and not rescheduled. Now, why? I thought this was a huge deal. The illegals, I mean, they voted. They almost lost the election for me. But, you know, I would have won if it weren't for the illegals. I would have won the popular vote. So, we really need to go and we need to vet and make sure that our electoral system has integrity in it, that people aren't doing in-person voter fraud. Those illegals. We got to get out of those, right? We got to get them out of there. Well, maybe there's no proof, but I'll get to that. According to a senior administration after talking to CNN, the voter fraud investigation is no longer a top priority to the president. Huh. Now, that's weird. Now, I got to note that the same official says that, hey, the investigation was not off the table, but it's not expected anytime soon. So just wait for it. Wait for it. It's going to be a while. Now, it was also noted that many at the White House hoped that Trump would not pursue this issue. However, there was one aide that felt that the president was just waiting on Jeff Sessions to be confirmed as Attorney General, and that, quote, there will be something signed, but I don't think it will be now. So even if Jeff Sessions, when he gets confirmed as Attorney General, you still might have to wait a while for them to get around to it. But again, I thought this was a top priority for the Trump administration. Top priority. Apparently not. Look, here's what I think. This isn't going to happen because, look, they're not going to do an investigation because they already know that what they're saying is bullshit. There's actually no proof, and they don't want to be embarrassed. They already know that, oh, right, there's almost no in-person voter fraud. And look, Donald Trump, he won the Electoral College, but he didn't actually win the popular vote. Now, that ended up winning the presidency, obviously, because the Electoral College seems to matter a lot more than the popular vote. But still, why this is a big issue is that, look, Donald Trump doesn't want to be a loser. He doesn't want to be known as being a loser. The whole thought of it scares the orange right off him. He can't stand the idea of, no, I could not possibly have lost the popular vote. No. I'm a winner. You're a loser. And look, again, he doesn't want to be seen. He doesn't want to be seen as a loser. So look, if he keeps his narrative out there and doesn't do an investigation, he ends up winning anyway. Why? Because the supporters won't care because they already believe that he won. Hell, even if they do an investigation and he is embarrassed by all the different media reporting on it, his true believers still will believe, no. That investigation that Donald Trump did, biased. It's fake news. I still believe. But look, everybody else, we live in a fact and database world, right? And in this world, where we have reality, Donald Trump did not win the popular vote. Established fact. Now, another fact is that in-person voter fraud, especially committed by undocumented immigrants, incredibly rare. In fact, data taken from general, primary, special, and municipal elections, this is reported by the Washington Post, from 2000 to 2014, found just 31 instances of in-person voter fraud. So all those different elections, right? Now, to put this in context, there were over 1 billion ballots cast within that same time period, and they found 31 cases of in-person voter fraud. That's why they don't want an investigation. The people that are telling Trump, don't follow this up. Please don't follow this up. Please don't do it, Donald. Don't. No. You're going to look dumb. You're going to look stupid. Don't do it. And look, maybe those advisors actually did have an effect. Because remember, the way that Donald Trump works is that if he's wrong, you can't tell him he's wrong in front of everybody else. You got to pull little Donnie aside and say, here's why you're wrong, okay? This actually, your math is a little bit off, Mr. Trump. You didn't actually win. You didn't actually win the popular vote. You actually lost the popular vote. Here's the facts. But that's okay. You're still president, so why should it matter? That's what you have to do. Also, the way that Donald Trump works is that you also have to be the last person in the room to talk to him. And so, look, if you're the last person in the room and you're one saying we should not do this investigation, well, he's probably going to listen to you. Now, I have another little piece to throw in here as well, and this has to do with these giant investigations that Donald Trump loves to talk about. Do you remember the investigation into Obama's birth certificate? See, this is like that, only slightly more embarrassing. Because now, instead of a random billionaire that's going on Fox News spouting crap, he is now the president of the United States. Sad. Sad indeed. All right. Last chance for a call, man. 796-4975. Get a hold of me on Skype if you're interested. So, if not, we got one more story. We're going to talk about Jim Bakker, and then we'll wrap up the show for the week. All right. No takers? No takers? All righty. Now, televangelist Jim Bakker just can't get over how amazing it was for him to be at Donald Trump's inauguration. Now, he's going to go on his show, and he's going to describe his experience, at attending this very somewhat sparsely populated event, saying that it was so wonderful to be there that it literally brought him to tears.
We're like the royal family or something. And so then we walk around the side. So we walked around the edge, and there we suddenly see all the million people. We saw the front side, I guess, where the inauguration was being held.
Yeah.
And almost to the minute that our feet touched that other side, and we looked up, and there started the music. Dun, 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 dun.
Perfect timing.
Right.
And I saw the president,
Right on time.
the to-be,
Right on
who was
time.
going to be president any minute there, and his wife, and I cried. I just stood there and cried. It was like God was saying, all your work, I almost killed myself trying to get this man elected, and I mean it. I worked. I was on the phone getting the who's who of the world to come here to be on this show and to do, and I watched every minute and prayed, interceded. I bound more demons in hell to try to keep them from destroying Mr. Trump.
Okay. Hell, man, I called people. I tried to get the who's who, and they wouldn't answer. So I ended up getting 3 doors down. But anyway, I worked hard, man. I bound some demons. Because, you got to bound them demons. You got to stop them from destroying Mr. Trump. Right. This guy, man. Look, I'm watching this video. And I'm thinking, like, this guy, these people, they're like a cult. There's these crazy evangelicals, man. Like, for example, you got Jim Bakker, you got Pat Robertson, you got all these different pastors, man, that are literally convinced, or at least that's what they're saying, that God is working through a twice-divorced, pussy-grabbing billionaire who I can almost guarantee hasn't read the Bible. That's what this guy's all about. You think he's a Christian? No, he's saying that he's a Christian because, I don't know, it plays well. Just like, I don't know, saying that lock her up. Remember that? That played well. Oh, that played great. Man, he's playing these people, okay? And these people, they actually believe it. Maybe not the pastors, maybe not Jim Bakker. Well, maybe Jim Bakker. I don't know. What I know is that a lot of these people, these evangelical pastors, they want to make money. They want to make money off of Donald Trump. Now, I'm talking about the televangelists, right? There are actually people at home watching this, watching Jim Bakker and going, yes, God bless, man. Yes, totally. Donald Trump, Jesus is working through Donald Trump while he takes my health care. While he gives more tax breaks to the rich. While he, filled his cabinet with Goldman Sachs members. Oh, great. Look, as for Bakker, again, maybe he believes it, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I can't get in this guy's head. What I do know is that he still wants to sell his disgusting food buckets. But other than money, I don't really know what drives these people. I just don't know. It ain't Jesus. You know what? Jesus was poor. Jesus was homeless. He told his followers, if you want to follow me, you have to be poor and homeless too. Give your shit to the poor. It's got no place here. It's not coming with you. It ain't coming with you. You can't take it with you to heaven. So to see so many supposed Christians that are just too enamored with the epitome of wealth and privilege, look, stuff that Jesus, by the way, didn't stand at all for. Look, if I were a Christian, I am not. My blood would boil. Looking at these people, how dare you take my religion? How dare you? Look, thankfully, there are a lot of people who don't buy into his nonsense. But still, there are a lot of people who do. And there are too many. And so, look, that's why we talk about this guy and his ridiculous demon binding and his utter cult-like devotion to Donald Trump. It's amazing people continue to fall for this, and that's why we gotta point it out, man. That's why we gotta do what we gotta do. All right. There is somebody that wants to call, so give me a call. I'll stay to take your question. 796-4975. It's 989-796-4975. Sorry, or TYT Nation on Skype. So, getting your question now, man, because I know you want to talk about it. So, well, I guess like I'm seeing in the chat, I just want to address this. Iran sanctions. I don't know quite what the question is actually about, other than what do I think about the Iran sanctions? Like what ones specifically? Ones that Donald Trump is threatening to put back on, or what are you talking about? The Iran deal? Like, I need a little bit of context, essentially, if I want to answer your question correctly, because I do believe that sanctions at this point, they really go to harm regular people. They don't actually harm governments. They're not harming the mullahs of Iran. Okay, the mullahs are still sitting pretty. It's the people, it's regular people. Now, I guess if you want to argue that sanctions are there because what you want to do is you want to starve regular people so that they get pissed and so that they rise up against the government. That's a possibility. And, that would make a little bit of sense, except that we haven't seen anything like that. And so if you're trying to do sanctions for that, well, we've already been doing sanctions for a long time. So I don't know if they actually have a thing of working. I think what works better is diplomacy. What we have, like things like the Iran deal. I'm actually in favor of the Iran deal because it actually did what we wanted them to do. And maybe sanctions helped to set the table for that, because they were hurting and we were holding their money. Essentially, is what happened. We were holding their money, and then we said, "Look, if you guys want your money back, you need to come to the table. We need to talk about this nuke issue." So, I think maybe it did help bring them to the table. In that case, maybe sanctions do work. But they need to be a precursor to diplomacy, which I think ultimately gets you to a better goal. So, I mean, that's kind of what. And here, I'm gonna get some context here.
No.
Hey, what's your name, comment, question, man?
Hi.
Hi.
Raven.
Hi, Raven. What's up?
I was wondering what you thought of the Iran sanctions.
Okay, so like, give me some more context so I can answer your question maybe a little bit better if I hadn't already.
Apparently, the Trump administration issued sanctions against Iran.
Okay. All right, so the issue of sanctions is a little complicated. What we have, so sanctions. I mean, I just explained, like, sanctions. I do think they're ineffective for the most part, unless you don't follow it up with diplomacy. If you follow it up with diplomacy, then it might actually have a little bit of effect. So I'm wondering what Donald Trump, in issuing the sanctions, what is his goal? Is his goal to get Iran, to force Iran to sit them down for a deal. Now, Donald Trump says he's this great deal maker. So maybe that's his goal. And if he's trying to follow it up with diplomacy, that might actually turn out to be a positive thing. But if they're just doing sanctions in order to do sanctions, all it's going to do is it's going to hurt people down at the bottom, the Iranian citizens, and not the mullahs. When you do sanctions, for example, we've been doing sanctions on North Korea for a long time. You know who's benefiting from that? Well, nobody's benefiting from that, but the people that are being hurt are the people, again, at the bottom. Kim Jong-un is still sitting pretty on his golden throne, okay? Or his golden piss pot or whatever he has. So it's not really doing a whole lot to force the regime. And look, I don't, like, foreign policy isn't my huge strong suit. I think you guys might be aware of that. But I'm just looking at it from like a normal working guy perspective that doesn't really have huge intimate knowledge into the intricacies of foreign policy. But I do believe that diplomacy works. So if we actually try diplomacy, who knows what might come out of it? Something good, or maybe nothing at all. I don't know. Like, if Donald Trump thinks that he can maybe, and I don't even know his goal at this point, to prevent Iran from, building nuclear weapons. Well, we already kind of did that with the Iran deal. So, I mean, that was diplomacy in action. So again, I don't know really the aim of these sanctions, other than to just be, pumping my chest or thumping my chest and going, me strong, Iran bad, you weak, baby, sad. But no, that's a good question. Let me look into it, and I'll see, about doing a video on this maybe on Monday. We'll talk about it with Ron when he comes on the show, and we'll see. I got to dig into the policy. I got to look into it. So, but thank you so much, Raven, for your question. I appreciate that, and thank you for watching. All right. So, if there's anybody else that wants to ask a quick question, give me a call, 989-796-4975 or TYT Nation on Skype. If not, then we're gonna wrap this thing up for the weekend. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. But again, seeing it from my perspective, it's more of like an issue of who does it hurt and how does it benefit, and how are we going to use the sanctions as a negotiating tool. And I do think the Obama administration did it smart with the Iran deal. All right. We got another call in here. Hey, welcome to the show. Comment, question?
Oh, hi. I didn't expect to get on. So,
Sure.
If you haven't talked about the Bowling Green massacre yet, I would like to just make a comment.
Sure.
My comment is that, honestly, just like most of Trump administration's ridiculous activities in the past couple of weeks, the Bowling Massacre,
Sure.
the Bowling Green Massacre, it just pretty much shows how ridiculous, how foolish, how out of touch, and how pretty much stupid the Trump administration has become. Since the fact that everything is fake, everything about it is fake just to justify the Iran travel ban or whatever it's supposed to be called.
Right.
But it's really pathetic. And the sad thing about it is I haven't even heard about it until today during an article on BET.com. And the fact that everybody's just gone cruelly about it, it's just really pathetic and hilarious how everything has become nowadays.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Look, yeah, we did talk about the Bowling Green, the so-called Bowling Green massacre, and basically how Kellyanne Conway is coming up with more alternative facts to justify this ridiculous ban. You're right, it is insanity, and it's ridiculous, and this is what we have from this administration, is that we've got crazy people that are running the asylum. Essentially, you've got the inmates running the prison. It's insanity, and look, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know what's gonna come from this. The media is doing what we can. Even corporate media is starting to step up, which is amazing, right? Because I'm always on corporate media's ass about this whole thing, about just coming up with ridiculous stuff to justify what is actually in reality just a ban on Muslims in a religious test. And what it's there is that it's the whole purpose of it is just to fearmonger. And to have Trump come out there and say, me strong, me protect America, when they're not actually protecting America, they're actually probably going to end up with this whole thing creating more terrorists. So
Exactly, absolutely.
So,
by the way, about that corporate media thing that they're stepping up, I saw this tweet on that article from CNN saying that that Kellyanne was right, that they haven't covered the Bowling Green massacre because it doesn't exist. I kind of laughed my ass off as soon as I read it, because the fact that they just come like in their own voice about it just really makes me happy that the media is absolutely doing what they can to fight against Trump and his cronies' foolishness at this point.
Yeah,
and,
because
that's my from them has grown a bit, basically.
Yeah, and look, if they hadn't been fighting against this, I mean, that would have been the most ridiculous thing, because again, these are easily provable lies. And just easily provable bullshit. But anyway, Andrew, I want to thank you for your call. We'll take a couple more. Oh, no problem. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm gonna take one more. We'll take one more call. So, and then we'll wrap it up. So 989-796-4975. I love doing this. So this is great. So give me your calls, man. I noticed a couple tried to get in. At the same time when I was talking with the last caller. So, again, 796-4975 or TYT Nation on Skype. And, again, talking about Kellyanne Conway, this is like, what, the third, fourth, fifth time that she's been spouting nothing but crap? It's insane. And she's like a spokesman, and then you got Sean Spicer, who's already a fucking meme out there. All right, well, let's take this call. All right, you're on the air. Comment, name, comment, question, please.
Hey, it's Ricky.
Hey.
I was just thinking, I mean, I hear all this stuff like, you know, the Democrats need to really resist the Republicans right now, which they do, but it just doesn't seem like they have the numbers, even if they all kind of banded together. I mean, beyond filibustering everything in the Senate specifically.
Right. Ricky, no, it's a good point, but I think resist is more symbolic. Because, again, you know, you're right. They are absolutely outnumbered when it comes to, you know, the Senate and the House. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, for the next couple of years, he's going to be able to ram through almost anything he can. But, you know, again, you've got filibuster. But as I've reported before, you have these arcane rules in the Senate and the House that allow them, like, reconciliation in order to go and pass, for example, the repeal of the ACA. So, I mean, when you're working with that and all you need is a simple majority, which the Republicans have, they can ram through. But really, it's good politics when you're dealing with resisting Donald Trump. Because right now, believe it or not, politicians play politics. What they're doing, the Democrats are, by doing all this resistance stuff, whatever, because let's be honest, they're not so resistant when it comes to like tax cuts on the rich, right? That's kind of one of their, and then you got a little bit of deregulation of the financial industry, which Donald Trump's doing today, gutting Dodd-Frank. Well, you know, the resistance is more like, let's play politics.
I mean, I love the concept of the symbolic resistance. I mean, any politician, Donald Trump's like a big pinata. Anybody who swings at him is going to.
Okay, I couldn't hear you there. Can you repeat that, actually?
I said Donald Trump, he's like a big pinata. I mean, I agree with the symbolic resistance, but anybody who takes a swing at him is going to get a couple points politically right now, as long as it's a rational attack.
Sure. And so basically you're seeing what's the point of resisting? Well, I mean, what would it be like politically if they didn't resist too? Yes, they'll get a couple of points for resisting. What's going to happen if they don't? I mean, for example, you have five Democrats, I think including Sheldon Whitehouse, Amy Klobuchar, there are a couple of others that voted for 5 of Trump's nominees. They're getting skewered right now, especially by progressives. And so, you know,
Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one I forgot. Thank you, Ricky. Claire McCaskill. Yeah. So she's out there and you know, she voted for Trump's nominees in order to pass it. Steve Mnuchin and all that shit. So I mean, just like look at what happened to Cory Booker when he voted against the Sanders the bill that Bernie Sanders co-sponsored on prescription drugs. He got raked through the coals, man. There's a lot of people that are pissed off at Cory Booker, rightly so. And so they're going to look at that, and they're going to look at the people who voted for Trump nominees to pass them along, and they're going to be like, nope. Like, my hope is that they go and primary their asses, but I don't know if they're actually going to do that, if there's a good primary challenger from the left or whatnot. But again, that's that's up to the Democrats, and I think it's a good strategy, to be honest, politically, and not only politically but morally. The right thing to do is to oppose Donald Trump, because especially like when you're talking about the Supreme Court nomination, that's a stolen seat. So yeah, let's. I'm all for resistance, man. Not just resistance, like rebellion.
Go a little bit more than he has, but.
But all right. Anyway, Ricky, I'm going to take one more. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you so much for being a viewer.
Thanks, Jeff.
We'll take this next call here. Caller, you're on the air. Name, comment, question.
Jeff?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. This is Alex from the chat box. I have a question for you about Holland, Michigan.
How is Michigan?
Holland, where DeVos is from.
Oh, Holland. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
what do you know about where she's from?
to be honest, I've never been to Holland, Michigan, so don't necessarily know a whole lot about how it is there. Like, are you asking like in general or about the school system? Because what I know about DeVos is really about her connections to Amway, her connections to, the Christian homeschooling movement, or the charter school movement, stuff like that. I've never, worked at Amway. I've never, again, been to Holland. So I'm not so sure about the culture there. I know that obviously there's a big Dutch sort of contingent there, culture that exists in that area from what I've heard. But as far as, again, knowing what the atmosphere is in Holland and about DeVos and what she's done there in that particular community, again, I'll have to do some more research on that.
Right, and I want to lead you and suggest to you that you look up Freemasonry and a lot of sacrifices that took place in Holland, Michigan, and a lot of sexual abuse of children.
Wow.
It's really a dark and creepy place. I figured you would have already known that, but it's kind of common knowledge in Michigan. I'm 43.
Mm-hmm.
That Holland, Michigan is a very dark and creepy place. And a lot of it is because of Freemasonry and Nazism.
Wow. I'll definitely have to take a look at that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
This is the woman that's going to be in charge of our education if she gets put in there.
And she's already scary enough with all the other connections that we have. So if there is something to this, and you're right, and I find, go looking and go digging into this and find some creepy shit that we can verify. Ooh, that makes it even worse.
And I would also suggest see if she has any ties to Doreen Lilly or the Spolstra family. They are big Nazi movers in Rochester Hills and Holland.
Wow.
Doreen Lilly owns 2 houses in Holland. Mm-hmm. One is called the Lily Pad, and the symbol is a frog, and we all know what the Pepe frog means,
Right. All right.
So
well,
there are a lot of ties there that people are not aware of because they didn't know, I guess.
Yeah. Again, that's worth looking into. So I'll have to check it out, and I'll let you guys know what I find. Yeah, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Me too. Thanks.
Yep, I want to thank everybody for the calls. For I'm not used to getting a lot of callers, so this is great, and it's been a lot of fun. But I got to get running. I got to get these videos edited up and put up on YouTube. I want to thank you all for joining me for going around the nation today. We'll do this again. So we'll do more call-ins. So this is a thing that I've been wanting to do for a while. So I appreciate everybody that's calling in and that's sharing your guys' thoughts with me and all that stuff. So awesome. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Appreciate it. We'll be back Monday, 4 o'clock. Remember, 4 o'clock with Ron Placone. We'll have a great show then. We'll see you guys later. To everybody else, or to everybody at home, remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.